So today we are going to be talking about non-renewable and renewable energy resources. So first, take a second to think, what does non-renewable mean? What does it mean if something is non-renewable? Hopefully you know that non-renewable is something that is being depleted by use. So it could be being replenished, but just not as quickly as we are using it. So take a second to look around the classroom or your room or wherever you are. What are some things that are non-renewable or come from non-renewable resources? So lots of the minerals that go into making phones or electronic devices are non-renewable because we use them faster than they are made. The coal that is being burned to give energy, likely in your school or house, is a non-renewable resource. The gas in your car likely comes from a non-renewable source. Things like that tend to be non-renewable. So most often when we think of non-renewable resources, we think of fossil fuels. Coal, oil like petroleum, and natural gas all form from the decaying and cooking of organic matter over millions of years. And typically these are found in sedimentary rock formations because sedimentary rocks is where we're most likely to find fossils. So that's where we'll find the fossil fuels. Coal forms, we've talked about this a little bit, from ancient swamps and forests decaying and getting compressed. Oil typically comes from microscopic sea creatures, and natural gas is the gas that is naturally released by coal and oil, so it's found near those things. All of these are considered non-renewable, and once we use them, they will not be remade in a timely manner. So there could, in the future, be more coal, but it does not keep up with the rate we are using it. So it doesn't get remade quickly, and it is being used faster than it can be remade, so it is considered a non-renewable resource. So coal, remember, is a special sedimentary rock. It is organic matter that is being compressed and compacted and compressed and compacted some more, and it goes through these different stages, going from lowest to highest grade coal. First, there is peat, which is mostly still just kind of soil. It'd be very smoky if you burned it. Then there is lignite, which we have a lot of lignite here in Texas. It is a light gray coal. It is still pretty smoky. It is not super energy efficient. Then there is bituminous, which is better and is getting cleaner. And then there's anthracite, which actually has been compressed so much that it has gone through a metamorphosis and is now a metamorphic rock. And anthracite is the most energy efficient coal. Fossil fuels in general, like I said, they are something that will not be replenished very quickly with time. And if we keep going at our current rates, we will be entirely out of fossil fuels in about 70 years. Oil and natural gas have about 30 and 40 years respectively. Coal, by our guesstimates or estimates, we have about 70 years worth of coal. That is if we keep going at current rates. There are some studies to suggest our usage of fossil fuel, and by our, I mean humanity, not even just the US, but that humans are using fossil fuels at an increasing rate. So maybe it'll be less than that. Some gas and oil companies suggest it's more like 55 years left of gas and oil, but one way or another, in our lifetimes, we are likely going to run out of fossil fuels. So we need to look at developing renewable energy resources so that when that time comes when we are out of fossil fuels, we're not left scratching our heads and powerless. So let's talk about some different renewable energy resources. So we said non-renewable, it is going to be depleted by use. Renewable energy, it is not depleted. It is being constantly refreshed. It is being made as quickly or even sometimes more quickly than we use it. So if you look around and think about things that are renewable, solar energy, wind, water, all of those kinds of things are renewable. So the main different renewable energy resources we'll talk about are the ones that naturally renew and replenish over a period of time and are not depleted by use. There are a couple popular ones that we'll talk about. The first being wind power. Wind energy is captured by these huge wind turbines. Typically, you'll see dozens and dozens of these turbines all in a large empty space. The blades, as they are blown by the wind, they turn a generator that is located within that tower, which creates electricity. For all of these different resources, it is going to be how do you spin the generator? So here, the wind itself is what is spinning the generator. When you find all of these big groups of wind turbines, that is a wind farm. And typically these are going to be found in places where it's very windy, near open farmland, in narrow mountain passes. If you think there are two big mountains blocking the air, it's got to travel somewhere. It's got to go in between. So in those narrow mountain passes, you'll find wind farms. Sometimes even out in the ocean where there is nothing to block the wind. There are no skyscrapers or trees or things in the middle of the ocean, so you can set up wind turbines there to capture all of that wind energy. With all of these sources, there are pros and cons. There are advantages and disadvantages. So some advantages of wind power is that it can be very efficient and cheap where there are steady winds. So if you think about out at the ocean or in these mountain passes, if you've got constant wind, then this is a super efficient and cheap energy source. It's also clean. You're not burning anything. There are no pollutants. There's no smoke, anything like that. Some disadvantages. Typically, in a lot of places, wind is inconsistent. It's not blowing at 60 miles an hour every hour of the day. So this is not going to be a very good source in all locations. And it can be dangerous for birds and for bats. That is, it seems kind of silly to think about, but it can really mess with ecosystems when birds and bats and flying animals are running into wind turbines. So that is genuinely a consideration when figuring out where to build wind farms, is how it could affect local flying animal populations. Another form of renewable energy is geothermal, which is using heat energy from deep within the earth. So water that is close to or deeper down in the earth where it is warmer and it is being warmed by magma gets pumped to the surface. There are kind of two different ways you can use geothermal, either just pumping up that warm water and using warm water, or by then using that warm water to spin a turbine and generate electricity that way. So either just the warm water is what heats your house and gives you hot water for a shower, or the steam from that hot water can spin a turbine to give you electricity. In Iceland, there is about 90% of the population uses geothermal energy as their heat source. Some advantages of this is that, again, it's clean, there are no pollutants. It doesn't require anything else to produce this energy. So you're not reliant on the wind or the sun. This just happens naturally. And it doesn't emit any harmful pollutants into the air. But some disadvantages, it's not a widespread source of energy. You need to be in a location where that magma is relatively close to the surface so that you don't have to dig miles and miles down in order to pump this water up. It can be really expensive to build these power plants, and it is not something that is easily transported. So you can't necessarily pump these gallons and gallons of water across the country and use that as a heat source, because by the time it's been pumped across the country, it has lost all of the natural heat. So it can only be used in the location where there is this magma close to the surface, and it can be really expensive to set up. Next, we'll talk about solar energy, which is coming from the sun. There are two main kinds of solar energy, and you maybe use one of them every single day. So active solar energy uses technology like solar panels or solar cells to capture the sun's rays and turn that into electricity. Passive solar energy is just taking advantage of the way sunlight naturally moves throughout the day. So, for example, I have a dog who during the day will always try to find the sunny spot of my living room floor and move around to be warm there. If you've ever gone tanning, you are taking advantage of passive solar energy. That is just taking advantage of the sunlight where it is and how it hits. So some advantages of solar, it's actually a pretty simple technology. Using solar cells isn't super complicated and they're relatively low maintenance. This is also reliable and quiet. Wind farms can be incredibly loud. Solar panels don't really make any noise. And after you have set up the solar panels, once you have taken care of the installation costs, it's free, reliable energy. You don't have to pay for very much upkeep. Some disadvantages, you're not creating energy at night. Clouds can reduce the amount of power you get, and it really works best if you're at a particular angle to the sun, and as the sun moves, that angle is going to change. It also is reliable, but not super efficient. It only converts about 20% of the sun's energy into electricity. So one of the benefits of fossil fuels is that they are really efficient. You can get a lot of bang for your buck out of fossil fuels. You can't get as much for solar. Next, there is hydroelectric power, which is all about energy by flowing water. So hydroelectric power plants are typically located on these large dams, which can control how much water flows through, and the controlled amount of water spins a turbine, which generates electricity. Pros of this is that it's inexpensive to harness. Once you've got the dam set up, running the generator and controlling how much water flows through isn't super expensive. You can dam pretty much any river, and so since rivers are pretty much everywhere, this is a readily available resource, and it's reliable because there is somebody there controlling how much water is flowing through. You can decide to allow more or less water on any given day, depending on how much energy you need. Some disadvantages is that damming a river can cause a huge environmental impact for people, plants, wildlife. It can destroy ecosystems, and you're dependent on rainwater to continuously fill the reservoir. And building a dam is expensive. So the dam is expensive, but once the dam is set up, the energy is not super expensive. But it can cause some big environmental impacts for people downriver. Next, there is biomass, which is energy from once living things, plants or microorganisms, trees, branches, scraps of bark. All of those are types of biomass. And typically, you get energy from burning biomass. So if you've got my grandparents' farm in the middle of nowhere, Illinois, after the fall, when all of the leaves are there, they will rake everything up and have a big bonfire of the yard waste. That would be biomass energy. Sometimes it is referred to as biofuel, and that is specifically when the biomass has been mixed with gasoline, ethanol, something like that. Advantages of biomass or biofuel, it can be stored and used when needed. You can have a shed full of this stuff just ready to pull out and burn when you need it. It also releases fewer harmful pollutants than straight up gasoline or than fossil fuels. And it uses materials that you might normally just throw away. It can be scraps, it can be junk stuff that instead of throwing away, you are burning and using. Some disadvantages is that if you are growing crops specifically for biofuels, it requires a lot of land and a lot of pesticides. So people think about growing corn and turning corn into fuel, ethanol. That is a lot of land and pesticides and water to take care of growing all that corn, when you could be using it for food. And pesticides can definitely pollute the area. So for all of these different things, how are they generating energy? Solar and biomass, you generate heat that will heat water, and the steam from that water turns a turbine. Geothermal, the steam by itself that just exists, is turning a turbine, or hydroelectric or wind, the water or wind can turn a turbine. The turbine is connected to a generator, and some magnets spinning in that generator create electricity. So it is always, how are you managing to spin this turbine? With fossil fuels, it is coal or oil or gas that you are burning to create the same effect. So for your assignment today, research each of the different energy sources to fill in the table that is on the Google Doc for you. You can use the information I shared here in these notes about different pros and cons. And then create a fictional community. It can be Casey Town, which is a beachfront resort. It can be Hogwarts. It can be any place that you can imagine. Describe what your community is like and where it exists, and then pick an energy source or two that you think would work best for your fictional community and why. If I'm Casey Town is a beachfront resort, then I'm probably going to be looking into hydroelectric power using the tides to help power. Maybe solar is something I'll consider. Things like that. So research the different types of energy and then decide which one works best for your fictional community. For your house project, you will also have to, and your check-in for today is to decide, one, where your house is, and two, what energy source or sources will work best. So don't forget to check out house project check-in number 4, which is all about where will your dream house be and what energy would best power your house. Until next time.